Hi everybody. Today we're going to look at synchronizing game elements to music using Playmaker. To do this, there's a little bit of setup we're going to need. The way we're going to do this is by using a few third-party assets. We're going to use, of course, Playmaker, duh. We will add in Choreographer, which will help us with the music synchronization stuff. And for the purpose of this demo, we've picked music from a music library called Alibi Music. And we are going to be using some assets we picked up on the asset store called the Low Poly Ultimate Pack by PolyPerfect. We're going to take one little kind of modular piece out of that and use that for this demo. We've used it in a previous demo. It seemed to work pretty well, so we're going to do that again here. We're going to use some data that is set up, the what we call choreography, which really tells you how the music will be used in the to make that synchronization happen. Somewhere on the screen, so there will be a link, hopefully, or at least in the description, on how to find the video that shows you how this kind of choreography data was made. Effectively, for now, we're going to use the bones track, which has all of these little markers here, and the organ track. We're not going to use the bonks, just to keep things simple for now. We'll use these kind of curves in here as part of this. In addition, we've already pre-made the animations or the animation that will be used for the bones, but we'll get into that momentarily. So we're going to try to recreate that video that we saw before that had a few scripts here and there. We're going to do that with Playmaker, and we're going to show you how that's done using Playmaker, Choreographer, and Choreographer's Playmaker integration. Those three things kind of coming together will get you that music synchronization. The first thing that we're going to do is take a look at this choreography again. We'll go back to the bones, and we're going to look at what we want to do with the audio. If we play this back, you'll see that the red lines line up with this little bone rattle sound as the music plays back. That is going to be used as kind of a trigger to make the pumpkins in our scene kind of expand. And that's something that we did in the other video. We're just going to recreate that here, but this time using Playmaker. So in order to get Choreographer to play nicely with Playmaker, we need to actually unpack Choreographer's Playmaker integration. Choreographer comes with, I should say both Choreographer and the Professional Edition come with a special integration package, which is right here under the Choreographer root folder, under Assets. And you have here under Integrations, you'll see that we've already unpacked it in here, but it is this kind of, it comes with a Playmaker package. To unpack it, basically, you'll find that in general, by default, you'll just find this Playmaker integration Unity package file. All you need to do is double click this, it'll unpack it, and it opened it up on a different monitor for me, but here we go. This is what you'll see. All of these, this content here is included, and it's unpacked into the special Playmaker folders. I will specifically call out that there is documentation installed under Choreographer's documentation folder right here. So let's take a look at our scene. We have the scene here. We know that what we want to do effectively is take one of these pumpkins, which are the pumpkin leaves. And if we look at all of these pumpkins, they're all part of the same prefab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into this prefab. I'll click into the prefab. And what we need to do is to add a Playmaker finite state machine, an FSM, to the pumpkin. And that's where all of this kind of triggering is going to happen. Let's go into the Playmaker editor. So we'll pop this open, and we are going to add the FSM to pumpkin leaves. I should also mention that we can just do that by clicking on this thing and going to Playmaker. Where is it? Components, add FSM to selected objects. Right now we just have the pumpkin leaves, so we could do that. I'm going to do it through the Playmaker editor. So I'm going to add that to pumpkin leaves. We now have our start state, which I'm going to change the name of this state to waiting for music event. So what's going to happen is when this finite state machine starts up, it's going to get into this state where it's just waiting and listening for music. Now, the choreography that we created before, that bones track, is an event track, and it will send out a signal every time one of those little bones clack 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 sounds happen in the music. That's how that data was set up. So what we're going to do is we need to listen for that, and that's what the state is for. So we're going to go down and open the action browser here, and then we'll find our way down to the choreographer section, and we will add the choreography event trigger action. If I click add action to the state, that should be working. There we go. Great, and now we have our action set up. We can close the action browser. In here, what we need to do is for that choreography event ID, I'm gonna hit Command-Shift-K, Control-Shift-K on Windows to see that this track event ID, this is what we're looking for. That bones, I'm gonna copy it and I'm gonna paste it into this event ID, bones. That's the event ID I'm listening for. I wanna know this track, great. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my events, and I'm going to add an event here. Yep, I'm going to add an event, call it on bones. And in my state, I'm going to go into send event and say on bones. That is all set up. What we need to do now is right click on this event and say, hey, you're going to have a transition. You're going to add a transition on bones. So whenever this event is listening for choreography events, and whenever an event is triggered, it will send the on bones Playmaker finite state machine event, and that will trigger this right here on the waiting for music event state. Great, so now we have a transition out. We need a new state to transition to. So I'm going to right click and make a new state, add a state, and I'm going to say that this is animate. Let's call it musically animate. Great. So I'll run over here and I'll grab the on bones and I'll drag it over to musically animate. And then I'm going to make it so that this can go back to wait. Once we trigger this animation, which we'll get to in a moment, we can send ourselves back to that event so we can, or that state, so that we can wait for it again. So I'm going to add a transition finished, the standard finished transition. When it transitions, we go right back. Very simple state machine. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually animate our, or trigger the animation. To do this, actually before we do this, we need to do a little bit more setup over on the pumpkin leaves prefab. And that will involve, we have our Playmaker finite state machine here, FSM component. I'm going to go into this to add the action. I'm going to go into, actually, I'm just going to search for it and say animation. It's not the animator. This is a simple legacy animation that we've created. So I'm going to just pick that. And under the animation clip here, I'm going to open that. I hit space, but you can also hit this little button and click pumpkin grow. That is the name of the animation that we created. And all it is a thing that just starts really big and gets small, and it does through a smooth curve. And it does X, Y, and Z components of scale. Great. Let's go back into the Playmaker editor. Now that we have the animation set up and we have the animation component set up, what we need to do is go back to this musically animate state, open up our action browser, go up to animation as the section. And what we want to do is first stop the animation, add that action to the state. And then we need to start or play the animation. So I'm going to click that one and we can add that action to the state. Excellent. Those are now out of order. So I'm going to move that manually, the stop animation up above the play animation. I can close the actions menu again. And in this case, yes, I want this to animate on the owner. The animation name I'm going to use, let's see, we don't have a variable, browse animations on the game. Great. So I'm going to click this thing here and it tells us pumpkin grow. Awesome. We don't actually need to have the animation filled out because if we don't put anything in there, it will stop every animation that is playing, which is what we want. We want on this event, when we get this bones event, we want it to play, interrupt anything and play the pumpkin grow animation. So we will do that. We will say, okay, great. So with this, we actually have everything that we need in order to get the system kind of animating. We have waiting for the event. The event is triggered. It causes a transition to a state that causes the animation to play. When that animation playback command is sent, the state is considered finished. And on that event, that Playmaker event, we transition over back to wait for the next event. So what does that look like? Well, let's go back to our scene. The next thing that we need to do is make sure that our scene itself, well, it plays music. Because right now, if I play the scene, basically nothing is going to happen. In fact, the animation played, and that's because what I need to do is go back here and uncheck play automatically. I'm going to also apply that to the prefab so that they all do that. Great. But now, as we'll see, there is no music, no anything to trigger. So let's add our choreographer integration stuff, and we'll be good to go. I'm going to, first things first, check that our main camera has an audio listener that is enabled. It is. We're going to go in here, create a new game object. I did that with the shortcut Command-Shift-N. And we're going to call this the music player. I'm going to add the choreographer component. So to do that, I'm going to click in the choreographer section here and just click the choreographer component. That is the component that will actually send events. The next thing I need to do is pick a music player to talk to choreographer and say, hey, here are the events that I have come across. And to do that, we'll go in the choreographer. We're going to go into music players, and we'll pick the simple music player right there. That adds us an audio source and this simple music player component. And what we need to do is say, hey, let's load in the choreography for the one that contains all of that information, the markup and the events that we want to listen to. And that's this one here, Skeleton March Choreo. Excellent. Okay, so now we have our music player, choreographer is set up, we have events. We should see all of these pumpkins start to dance along with the music. We also need to come in and change the blend time to 0. We don't want to blend, we just want it to cut over and start playing. Really, there's only one animation we're playing right now anyway, so there's not really anything to blend. We'll go with that. Okay, so now we'll close this and we'll test our scene. We can back out. That's what we want to see. Those little pumpkins down here dancing along with the scene. All right, now let's say, okay, that was great. That worked as we expected to. Let's see about, first of all, two things. Let's see a new way to use choreographer along with Playmaker. And we will also see how to scale the, what are these called? Sunflowers, of course. The sunflowers in that garden, along with the specific organ sound and the organ track here in our choreography. Now these curves are what we'll use to drive the scaling. So you'll have a scale up and a scale down and a scale up and scale down. That was actually what we did in the previous video. And we'll see how to do that with the choreographer integration for Playmaker. So to continue, we're going to pick one of these flowers and we will go in here and open the prefab. I am going to, just as I did before, this time I'll do it this way. I'm going to add a Playmaker FSM component. Excellent. And I'll come in here and I will edit it. Again, here, this way, we're not actually going to use this start state. This we're just going to call the idle state. And what we are going to do is create a new state. Actually, let's create a new event. Great. So we're going to come in here. We're going to pick the events. We're going to make it on organ. And over here, we're going to say add a global transition for on organ. That'll give us this new transition here that kind of comes in and start. Instead of start, we have on organ. Those are kind of global Playmaker events. I'm going to come in here and change the state name to musically scale. And then I'm going to add some choreography actions here. Before we do this, let's see from the top down. We're going to get an event from Choreographer. The music will be playing. The choreographer system will send an event. How do we get that event into here? What we've set up so far is a receiver for the event, and we'll show what we do with the data that comes in. Before we get there, though, we need to see how that event signal gets into this FSM. So the first thing that this new way of doing it is a little bit more kind of flexible. So we'll go over here. Actually, over on the music player, what we will do is go to the choreographer and the Playmaker integration. We have this component called the choreography event trigger proxy. What we're going to do here is say that we want one event mapping. And what this event mapping is it's a connection between a choreography event and a Playmaker FSM event. And what we want to do is basically convert our organ event right here in our dropdown, that organ event, to the event on organ that we created. And we're going to make this global. You'll see that I have this choreography event trigger proxy on the music player game object. That is a little bit weird because we're not actually handling that on the prefab itself. We're handling it at somewhere else, and we're going to tell the overall Playmaker system to do this. Now I could put this component directly onto the flower prefab and uncheck the global event, and then it will just send the signal directly to the finite state machine. I can also select exactly which finite state machine I want to send the event to, but I'm not going to do that here. We're just going to show off how to do this on the global scale. So I have now made an event that effectively turns that choreography event in global, which is effectively global, into a global Playmaker event. Awesome. So I can go then back into the Playmaker editor, and I can click on one of my pumpkin leaves here, and let's go back, open the Playmaker editor, and we're back in here. I'm going to make sure that we're in the prefab mode, so I'm going to open it, and now in here, so now we know we'll have that event. That event is going to come through that proxy. What do we do with it? Well, in the choreography editor, we know we're going to have these animation curves. Each frame the music is playing back in here, we're going to have some kind of data available to us. The payload for the event that we receive is an animation curve. However, we can always say, hey, what is the value of that curve right now? The way to do that in the Playmaker integration is to open up Choreographer's Playmaker integration, is to go into this the state. We'll open the action browser here, and we'll go back to the choreographer section, and we will select the not get payload event payload curve. That would actually get us the full curve. What we want is float, which if those events had float payloads, we would be able to get the value there. If in the event of a curve, this action will return the value at the current time. Okay, so we're going to add this get choreography event payload float action to our state. Great. We'll close this off, and we're going to use this to access the value of the that curve at any given moment. We need to create a new variable to store this in. So I'm going to call this musical scale. That's just as a variable name. Great. And then I'm going to add another action, and this is going to be, let's just search this time, set scale. Excellent. So I'm going to take the set scale action. I'm going to say, yep, use the owner, the game object that this is on. The vector is going to be, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pick here in X, Y, and Z. I want it to just use the musical scale. We'll just set all three of those. And there we go. That's all we need to do. Now every single frame, this should be set. The one last piece that we should do, just to clean things up here, is to add a transition for finished. We're going to take this and we're going to send us back to idle. So what's going on here is that choreographer will trigger an event, and that proxy will send a global event to finite state machines that says, hey, on organ happened. For anyone with an on organ event configured, a transition will happen, and that's what this is right here. That'll bring us into this musically scale action. And inside of this action, we're saying, hey, since we're in a choreography event phase, a trigger phase, we have access to the payload stored on that. And what we're going to do right now is pull the float value out of that. And because we're using an animation curve, we get the value of that curve at the current time. That we're going to store into a variable, and then we're going to use that variable directly on the scale for the game object so that we can control musically at the musical time. We're going to control exactly what the scale of that object should be. All right, great. We will now close this out. We'll back out of the prefab view. I'm going to come up here and shrink this. And now that we have this, I'm going to save the scene real quick. Now that we have this, we should be able to kind of come in here. We should see these sunflowers start to animate up and down along with the music. There they go. Yeah, that is the basic story there. There's lots more to check out. Choreographers comes with documentation with the package, and you can take a look at that if you want more detail. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed.